He stood on a stage built from sound and desire, the kind of stage that could make gods out of men. Beneath the strobes and the sweat, Michael Hutchence moved like a whisper wrapped in fire. His voice could melt noise into seduction. His stare could stop an audience mid-breath. To millions, he wasn't just the frontman of INXS, he was the pulse of a decade that believed fame could save you. But every light has its echo. Behind the silk shirts and stadium screams, there were nights too quiet to survive. Nights when the same voice that once filled arenas trembled in the dark of a hotel room. People saw the charisma, not the concussion that had quietly rewired his world. They saw the lover, not the man unraveling inside a silence he couldn't name. He sang louder than anyone until the silence took him. In the 1,980 seconds, when rock was dripping with excess and the world was learning to dance through the lens of MTV, one voice rose above the noise, smooth, dangerous, magnetic. Michael Hutchence, born in Sydney in 1960, wasn't just the lead singer of INXS, he was the living embodiment of electricity itself. His curls, his whisper, his half-smile, they turned stages into confessionals and songs like Need You Tonight into anthems of desire. INXS wasn't merely a band, it was a movement fusing funk, rock, and sexuality into a new kind of rhythm. Their success was global, from London to Los Angeles, their sound defining what it meant to be alive in a neon decade. Hutchence became the last great rock idol before irony replaced passion. But fame, as always, came with shadows. Behind the sunglasses and champagne flashes were migraines, secrets, and a growing sense of isolation. For every crowd that cheered, there was a mirror he couldn't quite look into anymore. The man who once seemed untouchable was slowly disappearing behind his own reflection. So what truly happened to the voice that made the world feel invincible, and why did it die in the dark? He grew up under the soft, restless skies of Sydney, a boy who was always watching, listening, and dreaming. Michael Hutchence was drawn to art and poetry long before he found the stage. His parents' world was one of movement. When they separated, Michael learned early how to make silence his companion. That quiet longing would later become the raw edge in his voice. It began innocently, a few school performances, a few songs written in dim apartments with friends. Then came INXS, born out of youth, hunger, and the suburban heat of Australia's music scene. When they played live, Michael became something else entirely, loose, untamed, alive. Critics called him a velvet storm, part Jim Morrison, part prophet, all fire. By the mid-1,980 seconds, INXS was no longer a local band. They were global. Songs like New Sensation, Never Tear Us Apart, and Need You Tonight made them icons of the MTV era. Hutchence's face filled magazine covers, his voice filled stadiums, and his presence became a symbol of what every rock star wanted to be: beautiful, dangerous, free. But in the middle of every spotlight, there was always a flicker, a quiet question behind his eyes, as if he already knew how fragile the light could be. By the early 1,990 seconds, Michael Hutchence had everything the world said he should want: fame, beauty, love, and endless applause. Yet the very things that made him shine began to scorch him from within. Stardom had turned his freedom into surveillance. Every smile, every stumble, every kiss was photographed, printed, sold. Then came the accident. A night in Copenhagen, a sudden fall, a blow to the head that changed everything. Doctors said it was a head injury, a skull fracture that stole his sense of smell and taste. But friends noticed something deeper. The man who once floated through chaos with ease now seemed haunted by it. His moods swung violently. The charm remained, but the calm was gone. The media fed on the change, calling him erratic, difficult, unpredictable. Inside, he was losing control of a world that had once obeyed him. His relationship with Paula Yates, fiery, public, impossible, became the favorite target of the tabloids. Together they were passion and scandal intertwined, a love that refused to hide, and perhaps never could. Behind closed doors, Michael wrote songs filled with longing, guilt, and exhaustion. The man who once sang Never Tear Us Apart was watching the pieces scatter not on stage, but inside himself. The world still saw a rock god, leather pants, bare chest, a grin that could melt the front row. But those who knew him closely began to see something else. The fatigue that fame can't disguise, the hollow laughter between flashes of a camera. The 1,990 seconds were changing, and so was Michael. Grunge had replaced glamour, and the pop world no longer needed idols who bled sincerity. His relationship with Paula Yates became a tabloid circus. The press framed them as reckless lovers, ignoring the quiet tenderness that existed between the chaos. When Paula's marriage to Bob Geldof unraveled, Michael became the villain in someone else's script, the man who stole the family, the symbol of scandal. But in truth, he was a man trying to build a home in the ruins of his own public image. As INXS struggled to reclaim their footing in a changing music landscape, Michael withdrew. He spoke less, smiled less, wrote lyrics filled with loss and confusion. Friends said he seemed trapped between exhaustion and anger, unable to rest, unable to escape. There were moments when the old spark would return, a studio laugh, a shared joke, a flash of defiance, but it faded too quickly, like light slipping through a broken curtain. The stage that once saved him was now a reminder of everything slipping away. November 1997. Sydney was waking to a warm spring morning when the news broke. Michael Hutchence was gone. The world called it a tragedy. The press called it a scandal, and his friends simply called it impossible. The man who had once commanded stadiums was found alone in a room at the Ritz-Carlton, a place far quieter than any stage he'd ever known. Official reports spoke of depression, of a mind overwhelmed. But those closest to him struggled to believe it was that simple. Michael had plans, a tour, new music, a future with Paula and their daughter, Tiger Lily. He had spoken the night before, laughed even, as if there was still more of him to give. Yet by morning, the world had lost his voice. The room became a symbol not of his weakness, but of the silence fame leaves behind. Paula was shattered. Bob Geldof fought for custody, and the media fed on grief like it was entertainment. It wasn't just a death. It was a spectacle. For those who truly knew him, it felt like the light hadn't gone out. It had simply burned itself too bright to last. The echo of that voice would never fade, but the man behind it was finally still. After his mysterious passing, the noise didn't stop, it only changed shape. Fans mourned him in candlelit vigils, playing Never Tear Us Apart until dawn. His bandmates stood frozen on stage, unsure how to continue a rhythm that once depended on his heartbeat. The loss wasn't just personal, it was cultural. Michael Hutchence had been one of the last rock stars who still believed that music could seduce, provoke, and heal at the same time. In the years that followed, his name became a paradox, both celebrated and misunderstood. Biographies were written, documentaries produced, each trying to explain what couldn't be captured, the loneliness of a man adored by millions. His daughter, Tiger Lily, grew up with pieces of his legacy scattered in court files and old recordings, proof that fame doesn't protect what truly matters. Even now, his voice remains suspended in time, that deep, aching drawl that could make desire sound like prayer. Every time Need You Tonight plays on the radio, it feels less like nostalgia and more like a haunting, a reminder of a man who sang so loudly the world mistook his silence for peace. Michael Hutchence didn't just leave songs behind, he left questions. And maybe that's what makes legends last. In the end, Michael Hutchence's story feels less like a biography and more like a song that never resolved its final chord. He was the embodiment of light, a man whose presence could make an entire generation believe in the beauty of being wild and alive. Yet behind that brilliance was a shadow that fame could never erase. He once said he wanted to feel everything. And perhaps he did every scream of adoration, every betrayal, every silence between the notes. That was both his gift and his undoing. The world saw the star. Only a few glimpsed the man who feared the light would one day consume him. Fame gave him immortality, but it also took away his peace. He died surrounded by luxury, yet his final moments whispered of solitude. Still, his art remains untouched, his voice forever hovering between pleasure and pain, love and loss. Because Fame and Shadows is not just about who we remember, it's about what we forget to see. And in the silence that followed his last song, the truth became clear. The brightest stars never really fade. They just move to a darker sky. What do you think fame gives, and what does it quietly take away? Michael Hutchence lived a life that seemed infinite, yet ended in a moment of silence the world still can't explain. His songs remain, echoing through radios and memories, proof that beauty and pain often share the same stage. If his story moved you, if you've ever felt the weight of wanting to be seen, tell us below. Which song still stays with you? Which lyric still makes you pause? Because behind every legend, there's a shadow we forget to honor. Fame and shadows, every star has its story.